All right, so the media's hatred of President Trump is once again on full display. Just listen to this.
It feels like we've reached a level of crazy in this White House, and it's difficult to take it anymore. Reality TV appearances, tabloid gossip, conspiracy theories, name-calling, vulgarities, and a level of egomania few have ever seen in Washington. And that's saying something. It's like we're living inside a parody from 3 years ago. Consider, what would happen if Donald Trump became president?
The president runs his Oval Office like a reality show. He tweets like it's a reality show. Many of his actions are like a reality show.
Oh, and by the way, Chuck Todd, he claims to be a hard news, unbiased, objective journalist. But that's not all. Remember how the media reacted to President Trump's idea of having a military parade. Let's see, how many award ceremonies are there out there in Hollywood? Take a look at this insanity.
That's right. Trump wants a military parade. So you're just going full dictator now. Just wasn't enough.
I guess he wants his toy soldiers to march in front of him in line in lockstep.
Some said it would put us in the same category as folks like Russia and North Korean leaders, where they love a military parade.
The idea that we have to look like Red Square it is just absurd. Maybe the answer, Joe, is to just get Donald Trump a military uniform with epaulets on the shoulders and give him some salad dressing to put on the left lapel and let him march around.
All right, I said it before, I'll say it again. The left-wing Destroy Trump media is missing the biggest story of their lives. Here with reaction, former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer and the Hill's Joe Concha. You know, you go back and you actually see that this wouldn't be the first time, Sean. FDR, the beloved FDR, had this happen, and Eisenhower had something similar. And let's see, JFK, not a full display, but they had their own displays. And then I think of every Hollywood award ceremony, every music ceremony, but we can't have an honoring parade of the military. Really? Why is that so hard?
Well, I thought a couple things were interesting. One is everyone jumped to the immediate conclusion of associating with a dictator, as opposed to somebody who actually loves and respects the military and wants to honor them for their service. It's amazing. I thought of the people that you played that clip with, and maybe I'm wrong, so I apologize if I am, but I don't think a single one of them has ever served. And I think it's funny that when you have a president who respects and honors law enforcement, first responders, and the military, and says, I'd like to have a parade to showcase them to the American people, that's somehow a negative thing. Less than 1% of the American people have served in the military these days, and we feel more and more connected from those who do and those who deploy every day to go protect our freedom. And when you have a president who wants to honor them and show the respect that they deserve and maybe make them a little closer to the other Americans that haven't been able to meet someone who has served before, I think that's a positive thing for our country. And to see so many members of the media immediately jump to negative conclusions,
it's unbelievable.
Really shows how disconnected they are, not just to the military, but to what's going on in this country.
It's like the time for honoring themselves in Hollywood will soon come to an end. I think I saw that in Gladiator.
Right. Just hold on. Sean, in contrast, when the president decided not to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, it was a national tragedy. He was disrespecting the First Amendment. Oh, it was the end of the earth. The apocalypse is coming. But when he wants to have a parade to honor the military, oh, by God, that's horrible.
You know, you think about it, I added up, it was something like 25, 30 between the music industry and the Academy Awards, the Global Awards, this awards, Joe Concha. I think it's actually a great idea, and I think the country, we owe them a debt of gratitude, and any way to honor them, I think, is well worth it.
I think because President Trump's name is involved in this proposal, Sean, that is causing the reaction. And you could play a game of PU, it's called Parallel Universe, where you take the name Trump out and you put in a name like Chuck Schumer. And what if Chuck Schumer had actually proposed a military... Oh, that's right, he did in 2014. And there wasn't a sniff of outrage around that. But to one point, though, you could honor the military with the parade. No problem. The costs are down. Logistically, you could pull it off. No problem. But I think also the president really could back up those words and back up a parade by actually going to Afghanistan and visiting the troops. He hasn't done that yet. And I think that will go a long way in showing that he's just not doing this for show, as his critics are charging.
Well, I think that'll all happen, but even if he does that, I'm sure he'll be criticized. How did they miss the biggest story of their lifetime, Joe Concha? The rest of the media? How did they get it so wrong on Trump-Russia collusion?
Well, have they got it wrong? I mean, I believe the investigation is still going. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves on it. There hasn't been any evidence presented. No.
Is there any evidence in over a year that you've seen?
No, there hasn't been any evidence presented. And remember, everything gets leaked these days. So if they did have something, it probably would end up in the hands of the Washington Post or the New York Times. So no, not yet. But let Mueller finish his investigation before we start saying that there isn't any
I don't think Mueller
evidence
should
here
have been
whatsoever.
there in
But
the
now it
first
doesn't
place.
look like it.
I mean, based on what we've learned just in the last week with the Nunes memo and the unredacted Grassley-Graham memo, Sean Spicer, seems to me that this whole thing was a witch hunt from the get-go.
Well, we'll see. I want the investigation to play out only because I do believe that the president's been very clear from the beginning and everyone involved in the campaign that there was no collusion. So at some point you run out the clock and you say, as you've noted, that if you haven't found anything by now, let's give it a break. I think that the stuff that they found people for in terms of lying to them and FARA are obviously violations of the law, and those people should be prosecuted. But the underlying premise of this whole thing, that there was collusion from Russia, as you pointed out and Joe corroborated, there's been nothing so far. I think we let this play out. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see where the press goes from there, because they were wrong about the election. They were so ready to coronate Hillary Clinton. They were all crying election night. And now that they've wrapped themselves around this axle, we'll see where they go from there. Will they admit that they were wrong? Will they vindicate Trump? Or will they move on to the next one? Because I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen.
How did they miss the stories we've been talking about, Joe Concha? How did they miss the bulk of the FISA warrant was predicated on Hillary bought and paid for lies? How do you miss that?
Well, sometimes there's bias, Sean, where it's out in the open and it's very clear that a reporter or an anchor is rooting for a certain outcome. And then there's another kind of bias, and Sean knows all about this, and that's the bias of omission. I mean, when Sean was press secretary, right, I'm sure he was just stunned at the questions that weren't asked of him at a press briefing. Instead, it was concentrating solely on Russia. So, yeah, I think that's a very big story that isn't being covered because they simply do not like the narrative in these situations. By the way, Sean, congratulations. You got a lot of pep in your step. The Patriots lost, and here you are facing the fire.
Okay, thank you all.